That's good.
Great, thanks. So thank you for attending our talk about the story of the new Schoolie gem for Google Scholar indexing. I am Jody Bailey with Emory University, and I'm joined today by my Emory colleague, Emily Porter, and our external partner, Rachel Lynn, with data curation experts. Please note that if you have any questions, some folks from the DCE team are on Slack and would be happy to help you or help you to answer your questions. So our story, you can go ahead. Yep, thanks. Our story has three major players. So my office, the Scholarly Communications Office, provides public-facing support for our theses and dissertations repository, which we'll refer to as ETDs, including helping users with deposits, extending embargoes, and other general questions. Our colleagues in library technology and digital strategies, represented today by Emily Porter, work closely with my office to provide tech support, and they serve as a connection between my office and DCE. Rachel Lynn represents DCE today, and we have a collaborative vendor relationship with them. They developed our Hyrax-based ETD platform and now provide hosting and maintenance services. So a little bit of background. In spring of 2021, the Scholarly Communications Office was contacted by an Emory PhD alumna who was puzzled because she could not find her dissertation using Google Scholar. I was also puzzled. So I did some digging and found that Google Scholar not only did not index that particular alumna's dissertation, it didn't index any of our theses and dissertations. I later discovered that this was a known gap within the Samvera community. I asked my LTDS colleagues whether work could be done to fill this gap so that Google Scholar would index our ETDs, but was told it would be outside the scope of our maintenance contract with DCE. However, somehow, somewhere in a very lean budget year, Rosalind Metz later found some funding, and LTDS and DCE entered into an agreement to do development work, ensuring that Google Scholar would index our theses and dissertations. Emily will continue our story from here.
Thank you, Jody. As Jody mentioned, I'm part of the library technology division. And in addition to work we do with DCE and scholarly communications regarding ETDs specifically, we also develop and maintain a local Samvera infrastructure that we've been building over the last few years. So when we were talking with DCE about how to scope this particular piece of its project work, we wanted to make sure that we could use it for other scholarly collections that we have in our environment. And we also wanted to build it in a way that we could share it back out to the community if possible. So you can kind of see a little bird's eye view of our Samvera infrastructure here at home. But you can see that while we do use Hyrax, we're primarily using it for administrative and deposit functions only. And we are funneling our front-end discovery and access through a Blacklight application, which is not Hyrax. And ultimately, we want that to be the access point for all of our repository material for the public. So we're aware of the fact that because we want to blend that discovery of different types of material, whether it's scholarly or cultural heritage, we may run into some challenges with Google Scholar not indexing us because of that. So that's probably a long-term problem for us to solve, but we'd love to hear from others if you're working on that too. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rachel.
Yeah, so thank you both. In 2021, Rosalind Metz asked us to scope the work for the general purpose GEM to support Google Scholarship, Google Scholar integration with any Hyrax-based scholarly repository, and then to implement the GEM into their ETD repository. So we ended up kicking off in February. And we started out by laying out the requirements. Google Scholar actually provides inclusion guidelines, which outline necessary steps to ensure their crawlers can find and accurately index scholarly works. Things like how to build a sitemap, meta tagging for required metadata fields, et cetera. So we laid all of that out. And then it should be noted that Google really makes no promises about whether your site will be indexed or at the rate at which it'll be indexed. So, and as far as we could tell, we also they might not offer much support. So just to begin with, we had to set expectations up front that the definition of done for this project might look a little different than others where the proof is really in the working application. For this one, as far as we knew, it could take weeks or even months to see the results. So those expectations were set up early on. So once we had Google's requirements and recommendations mapped out, we looked at other literature as well. We researched sites that were being successfully indexed by Google Scholar. And we looked at specifically DSpace, Digital Commons, and ePrint sites for reference, specifically because they were actually called out by Google Scholar in their inclusion guidelines. So we used them specifically in addition to some other sites that were being indexed. Among other things, we looked at how they were implementing their sitemaps and which meta take sets they were using. The solutions we reviewed used either some form of Dublin core meta tags or the Highwire press set tag sets, and often there was a combination used. And we decided to start with the Highwire tag set because it just seemed like that was the most compatible with our examples. So we found out also that the sitemap could simply be listed, a list of all of the public access items in the repository with an update date so that the crawler can find any changes to once they've been indexed. So the GEM features, while we were asked to build the GEM for Hyrax-based repositories specifically, we actually ended up broadening that to be compatible with any Blacklight-based repository and Hyrax-based. So that was great in that it made it more accessible to more people. So the GEM is currently publicly available on GitHub, and it's been published to Ruby Gems. It includes instructions for creating sitemap like we have for Emory, and customizing metadata mappings to those meta tags. So let's see, are we, can you move forward one slide? Yeah. So here, you can see the meta tags that we used by going to an item page. So here is an item page for in the Emory theses and dissertations. And you can see that if you inspect the head element, you can see the meta tags and how we've mapped them here for Emory's site. And then the next slide shows just the real simple, oh, or maybe not the next one. Yeah, so this shows our simple sitemap. It's an XML-based sitemap. And again, you can see there the last mod date is just helps Google Scholar index any changes. So the next slide, as Jody mentioned, prior to launching the Google Scholar integration on production, Emory's ETDs were not being indexed directly. If at all, they were being indexed by other sites like PubMed or ProQuest. And the goal really is to drive traffic directly to Emory's ETD repository, and that hadn't been happening. But we launched the integration in production on April 7th, and as soon as the next day, we started seeing results. That was really exciting for us. So again, Google makes no promises regarding the rate of indexing. And in fact, they set expectations real low. But we have continued to see those numbers increasing steadily. So at the current rate, we have about 2,000 indexed and out of about 10,000 published ETDs. And I'm going to knock wood now, but I think at this current rate, we might see the majority of Emory's ETDs being indexed by late this summer. So that's really exciting. To note some things that we've learned, this process actually gave us the opportunity to do some cleanup in the repository. We wanted to ensure that the metadata, like dates, were being consistently stored in the repository to ensure that they would be accurately indexed. For example, some earlier works in the repository had dates stored as strings as opposed to in a date format. So there was some work there to clean up some of that data to make sure that the Google's crawlers were recognizing those dates. So that's just an example, but that was a good opportunity for us to do some cleanup. As Emory mentioned, too, Google Scholar doesn't index non-scholarly work. So while this is great for Emory ETDs, any application that has mixed content types, there would be some additional development necessary for that. Let's see, Google Scholar does provide that roadmap with the inclusion guideline, which is great. It does not offer great support. It's a bit of trial and error for us, and it might be for you as well. So if you run into any questions or issues, having a contact at Google might be really helpful. So offer to take them out to lunch and then share what you learn with the rest of us in the community. So I think that is it. This was a really fun project, and I want to thank Emory for their contribution to the community. So check out the gem. We have the links below. And in fact, I think Emily will show you that slide in a second. But we'll provide the links for the gem, and then check out Emory's ETD site as well. And then feel free to send us questions and any feedback that would be helpful. And I'll throw it back to you, Emily.